During the early 1800s, the infamous P.T. Barnum became famous as the Great American Showman. Barnum specialized in showcasing weird and wonderful attractions to audiences eager to pay for something beyond the normal. One of his main strategies for drawing crowds was exploiting strange traits in human beings. This display became known as his freak show, which toured across the world and inspired countless other circuses to launch their own twisted versions. So join us as we dive into the lives of 15 circus freaks that'll leave you speechless. Number 15, the White Negress. Amelia Newsham was born in Jamaica to enslaved African parents, but her skin was pale and her hair bright white. She was basically an albino, and that made her a target. As a child, she was taken from her family and shipped to England, where she was handed over to a wealthy boy like a toy. After getting bored, that boy sold her. She ended up on display at Thomas Hall's House of Curiosities in the 1790s, where crowds paid to see the White Negress. She stood on stage reciting poems while strangers gawked at her pale skin and woolly hair. Her face was stamped on novelty coins. Most people would have disappeared under that, but Amelia didn't. She married, raised 6 children, and kept performing, but on her own terms. The stage was the same, but now the voice was hers. She didn't hide what they used to shame her with. She made it pay. They called her a curiosity. She answered back, clearly, loudly, and without apology. Number 14, William Dirks. William Dirks grew up far from city lights or sympathy. His life was filled with just dirt roads, dark silence, and creepy stairs in northern Alabama. He was born with a deep cleft palate that split his face right through the middle. On top of that, a rare condition called frontonasal dysplasia gave him the appearance of having 2 noses. Most people looked once and turned away, but he didn't. He walked straight into the sideshow world as a teenager and made a place for himself. He eventually landed a steady role at Hubert's Museum in New York, where he painted a third eye between his real ones. Not to shock, but to own what others feared. He made his own living and met Mildred, a performer known for her scaly skin condition. They got married, worked side by side, and built a quiet, steady life together. Dirks didn't beg for kindness. He just kept going. His life wasn't about tragedy. It was blunt, difficult, and surprisingly dignified. Number 13. Gondino Rao and Lucia. Not much survives about Gondino Rao and Lucia. Just their names, a few billing posters, and the way the circus world branded them. They were siblings from Lower Burma, born sometime in the late 1800s, and together became known as the Pinhead brother and sister from Lower Burma. Ringling Brothers put them on display in the early 1900s, selling a story more than a reality. Gondino was also shown solo under names like The Missing Link and The Boy with the Monkey's Head, which says more about the audience than it does about him. Exotic, primitive, savage, the language wrapped around their identities, warping them into characters. It's unclear how long they performed or what became of them. They vanished from records the way most sideshow performers eventually did, folded back into silence. Their legacy isn't some wild spectacle or bizarre claim. It's the reminder that sometimes the act wasn't the performance. It was what others projected onto 2 quiet people far from home. Number 12, Ella Milbower. Ella, also billed as Ella Mills, wasn't interested in hiding. She stood over 586 pounds, and the circus world dubbed her 586 pounds of feminine charm. The title wasn't subtle, but neither was she. Crowds came to stare, to whisper, to marvel. Men catcalled from the rows as she posed, lifting her skirt just enough to show off the curve of one enormous leg. And she smiled through it, maybe out of confidence, maybe because that was the job. She didn't do tricks or give speeches. Her body was the entire performance. She spent most of her career with the Ringling Brothers sideshows, becoming a regular and fan favorite. Photos show her laughing, always camera ready, always aware of how she filled the frame. Not much is documented about her private life, but she left a mark as a woman who turned weight into work, into show, into business. She didn't ask for any kind of approval. She stood there, all of her, and let them look. Number 11. The Puppet Woman. Lucia Zarate was born in Mexico in 1864, weighing just 8 ounces. As a newborn, she was the size of a soda can and only 7 inches long. Doctors didn't think she'd live, but she grew up and stayed incredibly small, despite doctors' words. As an adult, she weighed less than a house cat. At 12, she arrived in the United States and quickly became one of the top-paid performers in the country, earning $20 an hour. They called her the Puppet Woman, a name that said more about how people viewed her than who she was. Despite her size, she was lively, quick-witted, and completely aware of the spectacle built around her. She spent years on tour until 1890, when her train got trapped by a snowstorm crossing the Rocky Mountains. She froze to death at age 26. Lucia wasn't a fairy tale or a medical oddity. She was a beautiful woman whose body never grew, but whose name never really left the stage. Number 10. The White Giantess of Massachusetts. Harriet Bowen, also known as Big Hattie, came from Fairhaven near Buzzards Bay and weighed over 700 pounds in adulthood. Some say as much as 783. But anyway, let's forget the numbers. The circus called her the White Giantess of Massachusetts, and the word white wasn't about race. It was a quiet way to market her separately from other women of size who weren't white. Hattie didn't choose the label, but she worked through it. She performed with Barnum and Bailey, Ringling Brothers, Buffalo Bill's Wild West, and Pawnee Bill's shows. From New York to Missouri, her presence drew crowds. Photos show a woman who carried her weight, literal and emotional, with a steady, almost reluctant grace. Off stage, endless travel and gawking strangers wore her down, but she kept performing until her health gave out in her early 50s. She wasn't remembered as a joke or a victim. For years, under canvas tents and gas lights, she was the biggest name in the ring, and she earned that title without anyone's help. Number 9. The Iron Samson. Alexander Zass was born in 1888 in Vilna, raised in what is now Lithuania, and later lived in Russia. He didn't start with a gym. He started with tree branches, rocks, and rusted chains. He trained wherever he could, eventually building a body that could carry a horse across his shoulders and bend iron bars barehanded. During World War I, Zass served in the Russian army, was captured by the Austrians, and thrown in prison. While locked in his cell, he kept pulling on the bars and chains until they bent. That's where he developed his signature method, isometric strength. He finally escaped, went back to performing, and became famous across Europe. Crowds knew him as the Iron Samson, but strength was only half the story. What made Zass different was how he built his body without machines, programs, or praise. He died in 1962, not just remembered as a performer, but as a man who proved power could be carved out of nothing. Number 8. French Hercules. Pierre Gaznier came from France and didn't look like anyone's idea of a strong man. He stood just 5 feet and 3 inches tall and weighed around 143 pounds. But when he stepped on stage with Barnum and Bailey, he didn't need introductions. He tore full decks of playing cards in half. He could bend iron and snap thick chains across his chest just by expanding his rib cage. At one show, he lifted a 260-pound dumbbell straight above his head, a feat even much larger athletes couldn't manage. He didn't rely on showmanship or costume. People saw the power for themselves. What made Gaznier stand out wasn't just strength. It was the way he controlled it. He performed across Europe and the United States for years, quietly proving that size meant nothing if the will was sharper. He died in 1923, but his name held up long after. He didn't roar or flex for applause. He just showed up and broke expectations. All right, guys, now let's move to number 7, Melvin Burkhart. Melvin Burkhart didn't shock you with size or deformity. He just did things your body couldn't. A former boxer, he'd broken his nose so many times he could stick nails and spikes up his nostrils without flinching. That became his act, the human blockhead. But he didn't stop there. He could suck his stomach into his spine, elongate his neck, and even twist his face into opposite emotions, smiling on one side, frowning on the other. He called it mad and glad at the same time. Melvin performed for over 60 years, always introducing himself, cracking jokes, and swearing to the crowd that none of it hurt. He was his own hype man and comic. There was no darkness to his act, no cruelty, just control, skill, and decades of repetition. Audiences laughed, winced, and kept coming back. He didn't fake pain or pretend to be something he wasn't. He just knew how to turn the limits of his body into something unforgettable. Number 6, the Chinese giant. Singh wasn't just tall, he was big. He stood over 8 feet and weighed 364 pounds, towering over almost everyone around him. P.T. Barnum leaned into the spectacle, dressing Chang in long embroidered robes and claiming he was over 9 feet tall. The outfits weren't about culture. They were designed to make him look taller, grander, less human. And it worked. Crowds showed up not to understand him, but to stare. Chang understood that, and he played the role with a calm distance. There isn't much documentation about his time in the sideshow scene, so his stay was likely brief. He probably took his earnings and moved on. But during that time, he wasn't just seen as a curiosity, he was a contradiction. A Chinese man in 19th century America who didn't shrink to fit expectations. Barnum spun the story, but Chang held the stage. He knew the trick wasn't being tall. It was knowing how to let people stare and stay in control. Number 5, the Wild Men of Borneo. Hiram and Barney were brothers, born with intellectual disabilities and weighing just 45 pounds each. What stunned people wasn't their size, it was what they could lift. Each could raise more than 300 pounds over their heads, and they often hoisted audience members like props. Barnum saw an opportunity. He gave them the stage names Wayno and Plutonor and claimed they were wild men captured from the jungles of Borneo. That story was complete fiction, but audiences bought it. The brothers toured for decades, becoming 2 of the most successful sideshow acts of the 19th century. They earned over $200,000, a massive fortune at the time. As they aged, their eyesight declined, but they lived long lives under the care of their families. The act faded, but the myth never did. Even their obituaries repeated the lie. Nobody talked about Ohio or the truth, just the fantasy Barnum sold, and the strength that never really needed explaining. Number 4, Louise L. Louise was born with 4 legs. The second pair wasn't functional, just 17 pounds of lifeless tissue that hung from her pelvis. No tricks, no illusions, just a body people didn't know how to understand. Promoters slapped on a French name, La Dame à Quatre Jambes, trying to make her sound exotic. But Louise wasn't French, and she wasn't interested in spectacle. She was a mother of 2, a quiet woman who stood still while others made her body into a headline. Unlike most circus performers, she didn't do anything on stage. She just existed, and somehow that was enough to draw a crowd. There's almost nothing written about her, no interviews, no memoirs, just posters and secondhand mentions. No one knows what happened after her time on display. Maybe she went home, maybe she vanished. But her refusal to play into performance left a mark. She didn't dance or joke. She stood still as herself, and that was the whole point. Number 3, John Rogan. John William Budd. Rogan was born in 1867 near Hendersonville, Tennessee, and lived quietly in a body that never stopped growing. By the time he reached adulthood, he stood 8 feet 9 inches tall, taller than anyone in America then, and still the tallest black man ever recorded. His height came at a cost. Around 13, his joints locked up from ankylosis, leaving him unable to walk or stand. He used a goat-drawn cart to move around, his spine twisting more each year. Showmen and circus agents chased him for decades, offering money, fame, anything. But he turned them all away. Instead, Rogan sold hand-drawn postcards and painted portraits to earn a living. People remembered him as kind, well-spoken, and deeply private. He died in 1905 at just 38. His grave was set in concrete to prevent body snatchers. He never let the world buy him. He lived tall in every single sense, and he left without ever being anyone's exhibit. Number 2. Eugen Sandow. Eugen Sandow didn't just lift heavy things, he sculpted his body into something people hadn't seen before. Born in 1867 in Prussia, now Germany, he started off as a sideshow strongman. But with the help of showman Florenz Ziegfeld, he changed the whole concept. Sandow turned physical strength into something visual. He posed like a Greek statue, muscles flexed in perfect symmetry. In 1901, he organized the world's first bodybuilding contest at London's Royal Albert Hall. The judges included Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Tickets sold out. Hundreds were turned away. Sandow wasn't just a lifter, he was a brand. He published books, made workout equipment, and became the first to turn bodybuilding into a marketable profession. When he died in 1925, the official report said stroke. Privately, it was likely complications from syphilis. His wife requested he be buried in an unmarked grave. But legacy doesn't care about gravestones. Sandow's body of work, literally and figuratively, laid the foundation for modern fitness culture. Number 1. The Human Fountain. Haji Ali's act was pure human control. No tricks, no illusions. He would drink gallons of water on stage, then expel it in perfect streams, shaping patterns with precision no one else could match. His signature routine left people stunned. He'd swallow kerosene, breathe fire across the stage, and then extinguish the flames using the water still inside him. Scientists examined him for years and never found a hint of deception. In another act, he'd swallow live goldfish and bring them back, still swimming. Born in Egypt, he toured the world during the early 1900s, performing for kings, skeptics, and scientists who couldn't look away. He barely spoke during shows. His control was the entire performance. What he did defied anatomy itself. No one ever replicated his talent, no matter how many tried. Haji Ali didn't rely on props or illusion. He was the act, the mystery, and the proof that human limits are never fixed. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon in the next one.